As I said, I'm really excited about our guest today. It's Jonah Soolman with Soolman Nutrition and Wellness, and he's going to sit in with us and give us a little bit of enlightened spirit as to where he comes from, where he finds inspiration, what guys like me and people like you should be eating on a regular basis. And I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm really excited to have one on the show to sort of give us a little bit of insight into what that world is and why it's important. So without further ado, Jonah Soolman, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to have you as well. And we've known each other now for a little while. And I must say I marvel at your practice. I think it's a beautiful facility. You're in there with your wife. It's family oriented. And I really like that. And of course, as you know, with my own self, I'm a big supporter of small business. So here we are, we're in it together, we're fighting the good fight. And just right off the bat, I want to know, two questions of inspiration. One, why nutrition? And two, why your own place? So first, why nutrition?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think why nutrition goes back to, well, certainly how I got into the practice in the first place. And when I was in college, in high school, I was always athletic. I played on the tennis team, I ran a lot, did things like that, and I sort of had this attitude of, well, if I'm exercising, then I can eat whatever I want, and therefore I'm healthy. And that was my attitude up until I had a pretty serious health problem. And not that nutrition caused my health problem, but while I was recovering from surgery, I started to think, well, I don't really want to end up back in this situation again. I want to see what I can do to take better care of myself to try and minimize my chances of developing some type of disease down the road. So that's when I started to think, well, okay, maybe my little bowl of iceberg lettuce, which is what I was, having as my vegetables at that time, maybe that wasn't necessarily the healthiest thing. Maybe there was a better way to go. So I started learning about nutrition on my own, and then ultimately I went back to school for it. So that's how I got into nutrition in the first place. And then what I found was, once I got into the industry, I found that I couldn't really necessarily help people the way that I felt was best helping people. I couldn't really utilize all my skills the way I wanted to without starting my own practice. So that's when I started my own practice. My wife, who's also a dietitian, she specializes in eating disorders. She joined the practice. We're both from this area. I'm from Needham. She's from Wellesley, so we're super excited to be working in this community again.
Oh, see, that's awesome. And I can totally appreciate the element of starting your own practice, because a lot of times, this is in the fitness industry as well, there's so many other things of you looking over your shoulder, trying to appease your boss, trying to climb up the ladder so that you can have, some sort of success there. And you can bypass all that if you have the opportunity to go and do your own thing, which you have done. And I admire that very much. I want to talk a little bit about, you as an athlete. I know that you've done certain events, and but I really want to bring in the element of nutrition while I have your expertise here. And I'm wondering what do you recommend for athletes to be eating, or people that are looking to be more active? What's good fuel?
Sure, it's an excellent question, and I think it has to be very individualized. I mean, what I say to people when they come, whether they're training for an event or they're, say on a high school basketball team or whatever the case is, there's no element of nutrition, in my opinion, that's more individualized than sports nutrition.
Oh, wow.
In terms of, what you read in a sports nutrition textbook. Every sports nutrition textbook is going to have some disclaimer somewhere saying that these are just guidelines. Try it out in practice, because what works for you might be very different than what works in the book.
I can testify.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what works for you. I know what works for me. Someone watching at home, something might work that's totally different for them, which is why it's so important to really get someone to help you who can figure out, okay, what's going to work best for you.
And that's where, you got to go see Jonah to get that. So what are some guidelines that you're familiar with, though?
Sure, in terms of training for a particular event?
Let's just say for the endurance athlete. So it could be a runner, it could be a cyclist. Is there a difference in what they should be eating, or, what do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in our culture right now, there's a very quote-unquote low-carb culture that's out there with the paleo diet and everything like that. I find that endurance athletes, the carbohydrates are really important, definitely. I mean, that's where the primary, a lot of the fuel is going to come from that. I remember myself, I tried going low-carb for just as an experiment. I think it was I maybe did it for a couple weeks a few years ago or something like that. I went for a bike ride. I think it was like a 90-mile bike ride. It was the only ride in my entire life I've not been able to finish. I remember I made it to my parents' house and I had to have them drive me home the rest of the way because I just totally ran out of energy. And it just shows the importance of carbohydrates for endurance athletes. And carbohydrates come in many different forms. It's not just like bread and pasta, but also think about root vegetables, fruits, legumes. I know you're really into lentils. That's certainly
I do like lentils.
Yeah, that's a great source. So where they come from isn't as important as just making sure that someone gets them. Where they come from is where more the individuality comes into it in terms of what's going to work best for them and the timing of it as well.
That's an interesting story that you experimented with a low carb diet. I think it's cool that you're a nutritionist. And I almost feel like that's probably what motivated you to experiment with that. And then you went on a long bicycle ride and you couldn't do it. I love people that really practice what they preach. And I love when you get somebody in the business and they actually live what they're doing. I've tried many different diets. I've done paleo for an extended period of time. I did vegan for a little while as well. And it wasn't particularly that I was trying to change anything about myself. I wanted to have that experience. So I admire that you do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, and that's an excellent point. And I think sometimes, though, when we talk about practicing what we preach, I think sometimes people misunderstand that in terms of, at least, I mean, I don't know what it's like for you as a personal trainer, but I know as me as a dietitian, and I know my wife experiences this as well, that if we're eating a certain way, sometimes our patients interpret that as that's the way to eat, and that's not at all. Practicing what we preach, the idea is, well, if you think of it as this way, as eating being a continuum. If you imagine you've got this continuum here, at one end, you've got the least healthy diet you can imagine, Twinkies and Coke all day, every day. And then at the other end, you've got the healthiest diet that you can think of, and that, it's going to be different to different people. But just like being here at this end is going to have some obvious health ramifications, being at this end, people always think that's ideal, but it's not. The people who I see who are at that point, their life really is not in balance. It's too much focus on the nutrition. So the answer for someone is going to be somewhere in the middle. And that balance point is different for everybody. So you found a point that works for you. I found a point that works for me. The idea, and I would say if someone is going to, practice, in terms of the whole practicing what I preach thing, I encourage people to find that point of balance that's going to work for them. But that doesn't mean they need to copy me or copy you or copy their doctor or their friend or their brother or sister, whoever. The idea is just to figure out what's going to work for them.
And I think that would be a good point of reference to have a nutritionist like yourself to check in with and ask a relatively simple question from a professional standpoint, which, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
You know, and then you check in with that person. So I dig it. I really like it. I also want to know, should I be eating, and me personally, should I be eating a particular type of food, a particular time of day? Does time of day of food, does that matter? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends a lot on what you're doing for your workouts and when you're working out. I mean, generally speaking, in absence of exercise, you want to be consuming more of your food earlier in the day because your metabolic rate tends to be higher earlier in the day, and then it kind of tapers off as the day goes on, generally speaking. Now, certainly, if you go out for a long run after work, your metabolic rate is going to be a lot higher in the evening than if you didn't. But generally speaking, we want to consume more of our calories earlier in the day and then taper off our calories as the day goes on, just like our metabolic rate tapers off. Before some type of run or something like that, we want to emphasize more of the carbohydrates. That's not to say we only want to eat carbohydrates, but in terms of the blend of our meal, I would say probably higher on the carbohydrates, lower on the protein and the fat. Then after the workout, it's important to get some protein in. Especially, sooner the better. The sooner you can get some protein in after the workout, the better. That doesn't mean someone has to have a protein shake, although if they want to and that works for them, that's great. But it could be having lentils, it could be having some almonds, it could be having a hard-boiled egg, it could be having some nuts, it could be having a turkey sandwich. So the list goes on and on.
Yeah, it's nice. We have a lot of opportunity here. And where we live, we have plenty of grocery stores and things that you can get all kinds of stuff to get all jazzed up on.
Sure.
Well, like I said before, I really like the setup you have for the practice. So I already noted you're at 555 Washington Street. We're in the same building.
Yeah.
I'm downstairs and you're upstairs. Tell us how we can get a hold of you.
Sure. Probably the best way to get a hold of us would be to go to our website, which is SoolmanNutrition.com. No spaces, no dashes or anything, just straight through SoolmanNutrition.com. And from there, they can find our phone number, they can find our email address. There's a list of frequently asked questions sections, or a section of frequently asked questions, which explains what someone can expect on their first visit. It explains what we do, what we don't do. There's a section that we call what makes us different, which explains our approach, or sort of our nutrition philosophy, you could say, and what sets us apart from other dietitians in the area.
Awesome, awesome. One last question. What sets you apart from other dietitians in the area?
Well, I think what sets us apart is really the focus on the individual. And it's really about what is going to work for this person. We don't tell people, we don't go into it with pre-scripted sessions or pre-written meal plans or anything like that. It's really about what's going to work for this person. What are their constraints in life? What are their likes and dislikes? What are their goals? All these things that make each one of us unique all play into our food choices. And so we need to take all of that into account. And even though we may be the experts in food, the person sitting in front of us, they're the expert in their life. So the idea is for us to pool our expertise, pool our knowledge, and work together as a team to get them to where they want to be.
And ask that question of, how's that working out for
Absolutely.
you? I think that's wonderful. And like I said, I have much admiration for what you and your wife are doing there. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. So this is Jonah Soolman. Him and his wife own Soolman Nutrition and Wellness at 555 Washington Street in Wellesley Square. Ironically or coincidentally enough, it's right across the street from the White Mountain Creamery. So that being said, go down there, see him sometime, come down there, see us sometime. You can oftentimes spot us both down in that area. But coming up next, we're going to have a great little workout. It's going to be nice for some core strength as well as upper body strength, and we're really going to get the heart rate up by doing some good plyometric movements. So stay with us, and thanks so much, Jonah, one more time.
Thank you.
Have a great day, all right?
Thank you.